think the big thing that we can probably accomplish in 5 years is just making the ecosystem feel like an ecosystem.
In the video we just watched, where David Schwartz spoke, you could almost feel the room go still for a second. Like everyone knew something heavy just dropped. But nobody wanted to break the silence. He didn't shout predictions. He didn't paint candles or hype charts. He spoke quietly, measured, but with weight. And in that weight, the price of XRP suddenly feels less like a gamble, more like the final piece of a puzzle that's been half-assembled for years. Because here's what he reminded us: XRP isn't some meme coin riding hype. It's not gambling. It's not a side hustle. It's a utility asset built for a world where payments don't crawl, where cross-border transfers don't take days, where liquidity and trust hold more value than slogans. And when someone who helped build XRP says this ledger, this system, can outlast the noise, that means something.
Decentralization, even the institutions that are coming to layer ones, they want them to be decentralized. They don't want them owned and controlled by their biggest competitors, which is what would happen. So I don't think there's a tension there. I think that's good. I think that's going to work out really well. Liquidity, my very first vision for the XRP ledger, as soon as we had the idea for issued assets and a DEX, was this idea that you could have pools of liquidity that were open and neutral that anybody could contribute to and draw off of. I'm looking forward to both enterprises, institutional players.
You've seen charts. You've seen pumps and dumps. You've seen rallies that felt like lightning striking out of nowhere. But XRP, it's different. The price you see now might just be the stable ground before the shift. Because while hype comes and goes, utility builds quietly, invisibly. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It layers behind the scenes in network upgrades, in ledger stability, in institutional deals. And that is what David Schwartz highlighted when he opened up the network metrics for public view. He showed uptime charts, peer counts, traffic load, ledger hub performance. He didn't wave flags. He didn't promise moon values. He did something rarer. He gave transparency. He showed that the system works. Solid, fast, reliable. And that reliability is the kind of backbone real institutions trust when they move billions, not retail traders chasing pumps. Coinpedia FinTech News. +1. Now, let's get real for a second. Because when all these fundamentals align, real utility, system reliability, institutional readiness, price stops being about memes or FOMO. Price becomes a reflection of demand, supply, and inevitability. And in that equation, every XRP in your wallet starts to feel heavier, more meaningful, more alive. You might ask, okay, but where's the target? What's the number? He didn't say a fixed dollar sign. Instead, he spoke about capability, what the ledger can handle, how it can scale, how it can outlive cycles. That means value is not tied to hype or sentiment. Value becomes tied to use cases, to adoption curves, to real-world financial flows. So this moment you're watching is not the start of hype. It's the calm before utility wakes up. The world might still be fighting over charts and moon posts, but XRP is being quietly engineered to survive and to flourish when real demand wakes up. If you believe in real systems over noise, if you believe the world will need rails that handle massive flows, transparency, compliance, speed, then this isn't just another crypto prediction. This is a reminder that sometimes value doesn't scream. It whispers. And if you listen with patience, with clarity, you realize that whisper is the loudest warning you'll ever get to prepare. When you really sit with what David Schwartz hinted at, something starts to click. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in that slow, dawning realization kind of way. Because for years people have treated XRP like it was waiting for a savior. Waiting for some magical announcement. Waiting for a lawsuit to end. Waiting for the market to wake up. Waiting for crypto Twitter to suddenly understand what decentralized liquidity actually means. And in this moment right now, you can almost feel this shift happening. Like we are transitioning from speculation to confirmation. From guessing to watching real-world clues line up. That's what makes this period different from every other cycle. In past years, XRP holders were forced to rely on rumors and hopes. But today, you have actual data, real system performance, and a blueprint laid out by the people who literally helped build the network. You see it in the way Schwartz talks about throughput, not as something to brag about, but as something that quietly scales in the background. The XRPL does not need fireworks because it already processes transactions in seconds, with fees so small you could blink and miss them. And when he points out that the system can support enterprise-level traffic without blinking, that's not random trivia. That's the financial version of a warning shot. The kind that says, this thing is built for high-volume liquidity. And markets eventually recognize systems that work. That's where price starts to feel less like a dream and more like physics. When a network becomes more useful, more stable, more trusted, a value does not have a choice. It follows. But it's what's happening behind the scenes that creates this quiet pressure under the price. The kind of pressure people don't notice until it's too late. Think about how many institutions right now are testing blockchain integrations with private ledgers, sidechains, liquidity rails. They won't announce partnerships every week. They legally cannot. But when you step back and connect dots, you realize XRP isn't chasing recognition. Recognition is slowly drifting toward it. And this is where the price discussion gets interesting. Not because Schwartz gave a number, he didn't, but because he indirectly confirmed what really moves price. Not hype, not tweets, not the kind of noise retail chases. What moves price is utility pulled by demand. You might be holding XRP right now thinking, okay, but when does that demand show up? And that is exactly the question people underestimate. Demand from retail is loud and chaotic. Demand from institutions is silent and enormous. They don't ask permission. They don't announce their intentions. They simply adopt whatever solves their problem fastest. XRP's speed solves problems. XRP's liquidity design solves problems. XRP's reliability solves problems. XRP's regulatory structure, though annoying at times, actually solves future problems. So imagine this. The day one major corridor switches from outdated settlement rails to a high-speed digital liquidity asset, volume spikes. Then another corridor follows. Then a private payment hub quietly moves liquidity testing to XRPL because of settlement times. Then a regional bank trial becomes a regional bank rollout. Then the dominoes begin to fall. Not loudly, but inevitably. By the time retail realizes it, the chart already looks unrecognizable. And we are getting close to that kind of setup. Not because of hype, but because fundamentals are aligning with opportunity. Every time Schwartz talks about scalability, he is signaling something. Every time Ripple publishes documentation about on-demand liquidity, they are signaling something. Every time a traditional payments company experiments with tokenization, they are signaling something. The world is preparing for a financial upgrade, and XRP is one of the rails positioned for it. But here's the real twist. The biggest pressure in XRP's future price may not come from adoption. It may come from supply dynamics. Think about it. Most people still treat XRP like there will always be an abundance. But more and more XRP is being locked, committed, or moved into areas where it becomes less liquid. And when liquidity tightens while demand increases, that is when the price stops behaving like a normal asset. It begins behaving like an asset entering a controlled squeeze. Not the meme kind of squeeze, the structural kind, the real kind, the kind that happens slowly, then all at once. This is where value shifts sharply, because you're no longer looking at a cheap coin waiting to pump. You're looking at a global settlement rail discovering its real worth. You're looking at an asset whose price begins to reflect the capacity it carries, the transactions it supports, the corridors it activates. It's like holding a train ticket in a country before the rail system is completed. At first, the ticket feels like paper. Then one day someone finishes the tracks, the lights turn on, and suddenly that ticket is access, and access becomes priceless. Schwartz didn't have to say XRP will reach this price. He didn't need to. He pointed at the infrastructure, the readiness, the inevitability. And that's the part most people overlook. Because this moment we're in now, this slow, quiet part, this is the moment that decides the winners and losers of the next cycle. Not when the bull run starts. Not when headlines go crazy. But right now, when everything looks calm and steady and almost boring. This is when people who understand value accumulate quietly. This is when patience becomes a strategy. This is when systems like XRPL begin preparing for their moment, the moment when real demand finally forces the market to adjust. And the truth? If that adjustment comes the way these signals suggest, XRP's price path might look less like a climb and more like a snap, a revaluation, correction, a moment where the market suddenly recognizes that this asset is not built for speculation, it is built for volume. And assets built for volume do not stay undervalued forever. There's this strange moment in every crypto cycle where the noise starts to fade, but the truth becomes louder. Not because people are shouting it, but because the market itself starts revealing what has been building underneath. And right now, XRP is sitting in one of those rare moments where everything that once sounded like speculation suddenly feels like it's turning into a blueprint. And it becomes even clearer when you look at how the entire market is shifting. Crypto used to be driven by hype first and fundamentals later. But the world has changed. Institutions don't care about hype. Banks don't care about hype. Payment networks don't care about hype. They care about whatever moves money faster, cheaper, and with fewer headaches. And every time you compare XRP to the alternatives, something becomes undeniable. When it comes to settlement efficiency, nothing in the market feels as battle-tested. But here's where the story gets deeper, because it's not just about speed or cost. It's about readiness. It's about compliance. It's about being positioned in the one lane that the global financial system is actively rebuilding. You can feel it whenever regulators talk about transparency. You can feel it when cross-border delays keep frustrating businesses. You can feel it when banks begin exploring tokenization and real-time settlement. This new financial era is not coming. It is already happening. Quietly, almost silently, and XRP is sitting at the intersection. This is why the price discussion isn't random hype. It's not some wild guess. It's tied to evolution. The financial world is being redesigned, and assets that solve real problems are being placed on the front lines. XRP is not a meme coin chasing virality. It's a utility asset being positioned by real-world necessity. The world is moving too fast for the old rails, and XRP fits into the new rails without needing a personality campaign. It simply works. But the part that gives XRP holders that strange mix of fear and excitement is how the shift is happening quietly. There's no massive parade. No mainstream headlines announcing adoption. Even when banks experiment with blockchain, they whisper it. When fintech platforms explore different ledgers, they do it in pilot phases hidden behind NDAs. And when governments talk about digital transformation, they talk in abstract terms, never naming the assets that will eventually underpin their systems. But if you zoom out, the pattern is too consistent to ignore. Money is becoming faster. Settlement is becoming instant. Proof of value is becoming digital. Borders are becoming irrelevant in transactions. And for years, Ripple and the XRPL have been preparing for exactly that. Not by talking, by building, by scaling, by solving problems that most crypto projects haven't even tried to understand. And that's where price becomes almost philosophical. Because you realize something, the market hasn't priced in what XRP was designed for. It has priced in what the general public thinks it is, just another crypto coin waiting for a pump. But that assumption is breaking down. Day by day, update by update, conversation by conversation. Each time someone who actually understands financial infrastructure explains why the world is shifting, XRP's future becomes harder to dismiss. You might remember how people laughed at the idea of instant messaging before it took over communication, or how people dismissed streaming before it wiped out physical media, or how people mocked electric cars before they redefined the entire automotive industry. Disruption usually looks silly in the beginning, and by the time people realize the disruptor wasn't a joke, it's already too late to catch up. That is exactly the psychological moment XRP is approaching. The disbelief phase is ending, the acceptance phase is coming, and the revaluation phase sits right behind it. But let's get even more real because sentiment cycles matter. There's a reason markets explode after long periods of boredom. When people are tired, when charts look flat, when attention drifts away, that's when the groundwork gets laid. XRP's chart right now doesn't look explosive to someone who is watching for quick gains. But to someone who understands accumulation phases, liquidity zones, and market psychology, it looks like a coil, a spring, something that is tightening, preparing for a moment where liquidity shifts sharply. And liquidity always moves where utility flows. That's why the smartest people in this space keep saying the same thing. Don't confuse silence for inactivity. XRP has always been the kind of asset that moves dramatically after long periods of quiet. And you're seeing all the signs again. Institutional pilots, legal clarity emerging, payment rails getting digitized, banks waking up to settlement inefficiency, even world governments acknowledging that cross-border money needs an upgrade. And the crazy part? All these forces don't need to coordinate with each other. They don't even need to know they're building toward the same future. They just need the same thing: faster, cheaper, reliable liquidity. Once that need becomes undeniable, the assets designed for it get pulled into demand. And demand is what snaps price levels. Not hype, not prediction videos, not influencers. It's demand. This is why so many experts stop before giving an exact number for XRP's future price. Because the truth is something deeper. The price won't move because people expect it to. It will move because the world will require it to. And when that happens, it won't matter what the chart used to look like. It won't matter how long it stayed flat. It won't matter what misinformation was spread online. The only thing that will matter is one simple question. Does this asset provide the liquidity the new system requires? For XRP, the answer is yes. And every step the financial world takes is bringing that reality closer to the surface. If the next phase comes the way insiders and analysts have been hinting, the shift might feel less like a pump and more like a reclassification, a repricing, a moment where the world says, this is no longer a speculative asset. This is infrastructure. And once an asset becomes infrastructure, everything changes. There's a moment every crypto holder experiences. A moment where you stop staring at the charts and start staring at the truth. A moment where you finally realize that some assets are not designed for quick flips or temporary excitement. They are designed for transition, for transformation, for the next chapter of money itself. XRP has always been one of those rare assets. And now, after everything we have seen, after everything insiders have hinted at, after everything the market has begun to quietly reflect, it feels like we are stepping into that moment for real. Because think about what it means when someone like David Schwartz opens his mouth and makes even the smallest prediction. This is not a random influencer making noise. This is someone who helped architect one of the most efficient ledgers on the planet. When he talks about liquidity, it matters. When he talks about demand pressure, it matters. When he talks about scaling, transactions, future corridors, it matters. And it becomes impossible to ignore how calm he is when he discusses XRP's long-term trajectory. People who know the truth don't panic. They don't chase hype. They simply wait because they already understand where the world is heading. And that is why this moment feels different. The market is not euphoric. It is not loud. It is not running wild. It is quiet, almost too quiet. And that is exactly the kind of environment where real shifts begin. When nobody is paying attention, when retail loses interest, when impatience takes over, that is when the big players position themselves. That is when liquidity reshapes. That is when forgotten assets become essential. If XRP really moves into its role within global settlements the way insiders expect, the re-rating will not be gentle. It will not be slow. It will not be predictable. It will feel sudden because the world tends to notice utility all at once. And when global money systems change, they don't ask permission. They don't care who is ready. They simply switch. That is why right now, more than ever, you need to stay close to the truth, stay plugged into the real signals, and stay ahead of the people who will wake up too late. This space rewards awareness. It rewards conviction. It rewards the people who can see past the noise and recognize the pattern forming underneath everything shaking right now. And if you want to stay ahead, truly ahead, this is the moment to lock in. Because things are accelerating. Things are shifting. And the next updates, the next reveals, the next institutional confirmations might hit faster than anyone expects. So if you're watching this and you feel that pull, that feeling that something big is about to unfold, trust it. And make sure you never miss what comes next. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with me as we break down every move, every leak, every insider signal. This next chapter won't wait for anyone, and you deserve to be on the front lines when the truth finally hits the world.